Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Troy Mepyans.
And today we're going to talk about Ashland 2D20, the post-apocalyptic role-playing game. For anyone checking this video out for the first time, not knowing what Ashland is, what is this role-playing game about exactly?
Okay. Ashland is, as you said, a post-apocalyptic. It's a little bit different than, say Fallout or, Walking Dead kind of thing in the nature of what the apocalypse was. We weren't talking about nuclear war or, zombie apocalypse or anything like that. It was essentially a natural disaster that ended up being compounded by things that man had done uh, to the planet beforehand, and just made it even worse. Essentially, you had mankind, because it's the disaster happens about 100 years from now. Mankind had discovered a way to tap through the crust of the Earth into the mantle in order to access geothermal energy. So, thinking that we had finally solved the energy crisis. And unfortunately, they didn't realize that they had weakened the crust. And about 50 years later, a high iron asteroid made a 90-degree impact on the planet, roughly the same size as the one that made the dinosaurs extinct. And rather than, shaking the planet, vibrating it like a bell, it actually compressed it because of the holes in the crust. Well, the mantle, that it crushed into had to go somewhere. And the vents on the crust are volcanoes. So pretty much every super volcano all went at once on top of this asteroid impact.
Hence the name Ashland from all the.
Exactly. Hmm.
Interesting. If I may ask, where did the idea for this come from?
It's, believe it or not, it was a dream about 14 years ago.
Wait, you mean like an actual
An
dream or
actual
something?
dream.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I woke up and I started writing stuff down because I was um, going to try to put it down as like a novel or something. And I couldn't get the story down, to the point where I could write it. So I kind of forgot about it. And then Road Builder came around, and I was thinking about something I wanted to do because I was working with Al on Sentience. And all of a sudden it popped in my head, why don't you do this? And ran with it.
Okay. Now, this is the second edition of the game. Can
Hmm.
you share with us the journey from first edition to second edition?
Well, first edition was, pretty much on my own. Al was definitely there alongside me, helping out with everything. But art, layout, all that stuff was pretty much on me. We had the SRD from Modifius for mechanics and things like that. But as far as art went, it was, you were either paying for it out of pocket or you were going to try to go with public domain, which is mainly what I did. I was able to find enough photographs and artwork and stuff like that that was public domain that I had a fair amount of art in the book. It's, nowhere near as polished as this is, but, it was doable. And it was a digital copy only at the time because that was, World Builder was digital only. Um, but this is, significantly better, has more, artist backing, editors, writers, that kind of thing.
So when you say Al, you talk about Al Spader, who also writes for Star Trek Adventures and other stuff from Modifius.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. He and I have played Star Trek Adventures together for about the last 3 years. He's actually my executive officer on our starship. So
Oh,
that's how we met, and it's kind of gone from there.
oh. So when you say second edition, it's not a. Sounds like it's not like a drastic like change from the rule set or themes or character creation. It's just second edition in the sense of it's cleaned up, like better
It's
art, better
cleaned up.
layout.
There is some more material to it. Some more lore stuff, in it that we kind of added on to kind of just, you know, enhance the setting a bit. And we did that mainly with art. Um, we did add a sample play in there right after the GM chapter, just kind of give people an idea of, okay, this is what the scene would look like. This is what's going on at the gaming table.
Let's talk about who you can be in Ashland. What characters can someone play in this world?
Okay. In Ashland, you are dealing with mainly three factions that have emerged over the last 300 years. When the asteroid impact took place, the government and military establishments around the world had built dome cities over where these geothermal drillings had been. And you're talking, probably anywhere from 150,000 to 500,000 people, under these domes. Some of them survived. Probably about between 10 and 20, we're not really sure. So after the disaster, the surviving government and military individuals, because of course they had, Cheyenne Mountain and all that kind of thing, created a government, if you will, for these dome cities called the Covenant. And the people that live in these dome cities are called metropolians, and the cities are called metropoli. That is one option. Now, what a player or a character in a metropoli would be doing is essentially resistance. The Covenant literally controls every aspect of life inside the domes in exchange for, security, food, water, medical, all that stuff. So imagine a modern city, a little bit science fiction, kind of almost cyberpunk type era, but everything is controlled. And you step out of line and you're exiled into the Ashen Wastes, which is essentially a death sentence. There are groups that are beginning to resist the Covenant. They're trying to expose what they're doing because, of course, the propaganda machine is going haywire. So there's that. There are, of course, what we call the Ashen. The Ashen are those that live in the wastes and survive as best they can. Plant life is still almost non-existent. Evolution has gone haywire. It's basically gone into survival mode, and you're seeing adaptations to species that should take millennia, and they're happening in decades.
Mm.
So I mean, to the point you're seeing new species emerging that shouldn't be there. You're also seeing esoteric talents in humanity, Esper abilities, that kind of thing. So, you know, everything is evolving to try to adapt to this new world, this new paradigm. And, the Ashen have done their best. They've learned to dig into the hardened ash, which, I mean, you're talking probably 12, 15 feet thick in some places. And after 300 years, it's turned to concrete, basically. So they've learned how to burrow into it and make, settlements under there that are easier to defend because, there are raiders and things like that. Or they've gone back into the ruined cities and they'll live there. So you've got that as a possibility. And finally, the scientific community, shortly before the asteroid impact, probably about 25, 30 years before that, had set up undersea arcologies, research, environmental research, that kind of thing. Uh, some of those also survived. The initial impact didn't damage them as much, but it was the resulting ice age, and then the spike in temperatures on the planet, evaporating roughly 40% of the water on the planet. And so a number of them were lost. The government there is known as the Council. And the Council has suppressed um, free speech, art, religion, love, anything that is not specifically logical, scientific. You know, essentially, you have your soul robbed. And again, like the Metropolitans, you're the counterculture. You're trying to encourage your fellow citizens. This isn't right. This isn't survival. This is existence. So, you know, the theme is survival,
Hmm.
but it means something different to each person.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like it's like only like a two types of play. There's inner city
Mm-hmm.
turmoil where you're trying to survive that, or you can survive what's out there outside
Right.
the city, which is almost like it's almost like it sounds like it gives me as a game master flexibility, so that if I
Mm-hmm.
want to do something more cyberpunky,
Yep.
cyberpunk, like, I could still use this game, or if I want to do like Mad Max like sci-fi craziness, I could do that.
Oh yeah.
I could do that as well. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's really amazing. So, does this book give game masters tools to like help create unique monsters or
Oh yeah.
deal
Yep.
with the inhabitants
Yep.
of the city?
The NPC chapter has instructions. Minor NPCs, major NPCs, notables, all that kind of thing. Modifius 2D20 system is built that way for flexibility, for the ability to create on the fly, um, supporting characters, all that kind of thing. So you've got the tools at hand that you can do that with. And as far as like building settlements and things like that, it's not mechanically crunchy. So, I mean, if you wanted to take Duluth, Minnesota and make it into a ruined city and there's an Ashland population there, it wouldn't be hard to do. You just basically would create your major NPCs, the people that your group would be interacting with, set the stage, what is it like here, and action.
And if I may ask, why did you pick the 2D20 system that Modifius has created as your system? Did you feel that was a
Well,
good fit to what you wanted to do?
very much so. I've been writing for Star Trek Adventures for about the last 7 years or so. So that was my first introduction to it. And I've really come to appreciate the system for storytelling. It with the mechanics that it has, the various in-game currencies for players, GMs, that kind of thing, it really makes it more collaborative storytelling than an adversarial relationship. You know, you've got give and take. Yes, the GM, that's their job is to challenge the players, but to ramp up the tension. He can spend the in-game currency, and the players can say, okay, we're going to be the heroes here. We're going to be larger than life. They can spend theirs, and it's back and forth, and you can have reversals and all kinds of different things that can happen. So it's really the ideal system if you want to tell something along the lines of Ashland, which is a little more philosophical in places, where you're dealing with morality, you're dealing with how far do I push this before I start losing my humanity, and if we lose our humanity, are we essentially extinct?
If someone wanted to use Ashland as a potential setting for their Star Trek Adventures game, or maybe another Modifius game, how flexible is the setting and system?
The setting and system is pretty much verbatim OSR 2D20. Um, it's different from Star Trek Second Edition. Star Trek Second Edition got rid of challenge dice. Ashland still has them. Um, and each 2D20 game is a little bit different, has a little bit different mechanics to adapt to its setting. So like Dune, you have your dueling, is how conflict is done. Social, combat, large scale, all of it is done with the same mechanic. Fallout, you've got your crafting systems and all that kind of thing. Star Trek, you've got your own stuff. So, with Ashland, I really tried to stay with the general because I wanted people, especially those that were familiar with the 2D20 system, to be able to just step into it, say, I recognize this, it's familiar, plug and play.
The first edition of the game, you pick out the artwork yourself using Creative Commons materials.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, you work with the yellow hand. Now,
Yes.
what was that like going from like designing this yourself to working with an art team?
Surreal, in all honesty. Um, Al Spader had been working with them, for quite a while. I had gotten away from Ashland, personal issues, things like that. I couldn't even look at it for a while, and Al had been needling me off and on. You need to get back to it. You need to get back to it. And finally, he had, I guess, he had given Jay a copy of Ashland and said, he would like to talk to you about it. And I just, I don't know if I can do anything with it. He says, you wouldn't have to, your property, you can work with them. So I figured, why not? Maybe I can get inspired somehow. And Jay had already done artwork for it and showed me some of it. In fact, the cover art that you see behind me there, it was in prototype stages already, and I saw that, and it was just like the floodgates open. I could see Ashland again and envision it, and have worked closely with Jay, with other artists, editors. You know, we've got writers that are, even if they're not working directly on the project, we've got, Discord channel where we can constantly be cycling ideas and, what about this? What about that kind of thing? And it's so much nicer than trying to sail it on your own. Al was a godsend, a lifesaver. That's why he's got the forward in the book. But, to have a team like that is incredible.
So, could you give us briefly the overview of the book, as in like how many pages, how many chapters, what's each chapter covering exactly?
It's 214 pages. I've actually got my copy of the book here. Ta-da! And you're looking at 10 chapters plus the index. So you've got, your how to play, your core rules, characters, GM chapter. There's an adventure at the end of it. NPCs, pretty much everything to just kind of step by step walk you through. Okay, this is the setting. This is how you create the characters. This is how the mechanics work. This is how you run it if that's what you want to do. Here's some adversaries and things like that. And here's an adventure. Go.
Hmm. And anyone can pick this up at Drive to RPG. They could get the PDF
Yep.
and printed copy.
Yep. Yep. Print on demand. Drive through RPG's got the digital. We've got fillable character seats on Drive through RPG. So, and they look amazing. They
Oh,
really
okay.
do.
Is there anything else about the book that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
Maps.
Hmm.
We've actually got a really great map of what Ashland would look like, given the evaporation of the water, that kind of thing. I'll hold it up here if you could see it. I don't know if that'll work. But I happen to be just researching, volcanics, that kind of thing. And NASA had um, like a time lapse of what the world would look like as water evaporated off the planet. Well, it was actually a sequence of like 20 different images from 5% water loss all the way to, I think it was like 60 or 70%. And I just happened to go through them all, found the one that I wanted. And NASA, any of their photography, that kind of thing is public domain. So, I took the map, and then Jay went ahead and added, metropoli to it, Oceanica and arcologies, um, major Ashland settlements, and things like that to it. So, I you can look anywhere in the world and say, okay, that's where we're going to be.
I've noticed recently myself. I've been watching a lot of like old Twilight Zone episodes, and I really enjoy some of the like end of the world, post-apocalyptic ones. Um, even recently, I was rewatching the Fallout series on Amazon Prime,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't help to think like, okay, this is pretty dark, but I'm enjoying this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What is it about post-apocalyptic adventures, as dark and as sad as some of those stories can be? We can't help have this. We have this drive to kind of
Mm-hmm.
explore and maybe even deal with issues of survival. What do you think it's about these stories that keep calling
I,
us?
I think it's kind of like, with disaster movies. People are drawn to it because they can put themselves into that scenario without actually being in it. What would I do? How would I react to this? I can sympathize with these characters because I can imagine being in that environment and just desperately trying to survive. How would I react? Would I lose my humanity when I do this? Um, and I think part of it too, especially for our generation, we grew up during the Cold War. We grew up with the mushroom cloud hanging overhead. You know, the end of the world was a very real possibility, and I think that colored the way that we viewed the world. Is we never knew from day one, to day two, what was going to happen the next day. There was always just that minor possibility that something could happen. And I think that's why we kind of glom to that. The people that are producing that are going to be from the end of that era, the end of the Cold War era. And it's something that, even you look back in the golden age of Hollywood, in the 40s and 50s, especially all your B grade movies. I mean, most of them were dealing with, mutations, end of the world, sci-fi, all that kind of thing. It was something that, as mankind expanded science, they began to wonder, you know, if this got out of hand, what would the world look like? How would we survive? And I think that's a question that mankind has asked itself for millennia. How do we survive? Well, now we've got the luxury of we are surviving, and we don't have to think day to day, am I going to keep breathing tomorrow? So we can look at these different scenarios and say, I may or may not, I don't know if I could survive that. How would I do that? And I think it's just intellectual. It's the mind is curious.
I know even I grew up in the city, so even like going through the woods and the idea of camping, I'm like, oh, how am I? I would not survive in a post-apocalyptic world. No, I'd be definitely be gone. Um, but uh, but I think you hit the nail on the head. There is something about exploring and the idea of survival and maybe in a way like problem solving. Because I
Hmm.
love riddles, I love puzzles, and I think, what would I do in this situation? There's
Right.
something about that that
Hmm.
calls to me. Um, but that's a very separate topic. But I really like the idea of this role playing game. It sort of reminds me of a historical event. I think it was 1812, 1814. There was this one volcano that erupted, and we had the longest winter.
Hmm.
I remember that's what kind of caused the early settlers in America to move west because of
Yep.
the winter wouldn't end.
Yep.
Um, and to imagine a huge cataclysmic event where a lot of the volcanoes and things erupting, the world would be something as simple. If one volcano could do that
Hmm.
for cause that much chaos. I can imagine something like this would be. So I'm
And
really intrigued by it.
I
Um,
mean, it happened in the 90s when Mount Pinatubo erupted. You had the ash circle the planet, and you had the ambient temperature on the planet go down. I think it was by 2 degrees or something like that. And yeah, one volcano.
yeah.
You look at something like Yellowstone. Yellowstone goes 2/3 of the United States is going to be unlivable.
Troy, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Ashland 2D20, the post-apocalyptic role-playing game, which is a former Diffius 2D20, which is available to Drive to RPG. Is it available anywhere else?
It We're hoping to have it available in hobby shops. We're kind of canvassing our own local hobby shops and hoping that as word of mouth gets around, that more and more places will start carrying it, that kind of thing. So
Mm.
if you want to see it on the shelves, buy it up.
And what, if I may ask, what are you working on now?
We're actually working on a lot of different things. Sentience is getting ready to go Kickstarter. Um, I did a mission for the mission compendium for that. Once Upon's got some things that are going. Ashland has got four major projects within the next year, because we're going to be doing books for each faction. And then each faction book will have, mission seeds, adventure, stuff like that in it. We're going to be taking the adventure from the back of the core rulebook, Haven, and we're going to be expanding it and publishing it as a standalone for all three factions.
Oh, wow.
So you would have an intro, basically your introductory chapter would be, for the Ashen, it would be what is in the core rulebook. And then you would have the Metropolitans would have their own. The Oceanicans would have their own. And then in Act 2, they meet and they begin comparing notes and seeing this crisis coming and realize we've got to work together. Otherwise, we're all dead. And it starts, that idea of cooperation. And that will lead into the adventure hooks in the faction books, which will eventually lead into we have an epic campaign that's being planned for all three factions banding together, major world spanning thing. So a lot of things on the horizon. So yeah, we've got the faction books, we've got the adventure coming. Probably going to be doing a Kickstarter at the end of next year. Hoping to do a collector's edition slipcover with all of the books. So a lot of things going on.
Wow, you're a very busy person.
I don't mind it a bit.
No, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Thank you, Troy, for taking the time to talk to us about Ashland, the role-playing game for the 2D20 Modiphius system. Viewers, I will put the links in the description below. Thank you all for watching or listening. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.